Our next speaker is Paul Mortfield. He's the manager of the RASC Robotic Telescope project, and he's going to give us an update.
Thanks, Randy. Let's see if this thing actually work. Oh, not the other way. Good afternoon, everybody. Get things going here. Today, I want to talk to you about the RASC Robotic Telescope project, where it is. Because of the time constraints giving this type of a talk, I'm not going to go into the history of it or anything else like that, but we'll tell you about the telescope, where it is, what it's been doing, and talk about some of the challenges we have, as well as some of the results. So first of all, we can see it's a 16-inch telescope because you could measure that remotely, of course. And it's got a big honkin' CCD camera on it and a small DSLR riding on piggyback. In the past, that telescope's been able to take pictures like this of M13, as well as do science, which it's, in this one, it's doing a transit of an exoplanet, doing photometry. The telescope is located at the Sierra Remote Observatories in California, a nice, usually beautiful place with very little snow. And the place is located about an hour outside of Fresno, California. How many of you have been to Fresno? Wow, lots of hands going up there. And it's about a 4-hour drive from the San Francisco Bay Area. And as you can see, Oakland up there on the map. And everybody knows where Oakland is now because that's where the Raptors won the other night. So the telescope is 4,600 feet up in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and usually on average, over the years that the observatory has been there since 2007, you get about a 237-ish average clear nights. Those are nights, not just a couple of hours. And this is the seeing from just last night and early this morning, where you see it's about 1 arc second of seeing for the entire night. It's a wonderful place. The sky conditions there, you can see the summer Milky Way. The sky is really dark. You get about 21.8 magnitudes per square arc second on the sky quality meter. And also you get the winter Milky Way. I've been there. It is dark, really nice and dark. And occasionally, with the all-sky camera, certain other critters decide to make use of it and peer down, and this was a little bird, so you've got an interesting picture of it. The telescope itself is located in Shed 9. This is one of the big multi-telescope sheds. The small sheds are single telescope. There's a total of 30 telescopes so far on the site. They're building 2 more super sheds, which will bring the total telescopes up to over 50. The telescopes that are in there right now, it's interesting hodgepodge of telescopes. You got a little 5-inch in the front, and you've got there's about 4 24-inch telescopes in there. And let's see if I can get this to work. Our telescope is right here, hiding behind this one over there. Just a couple of these telescopes here. This one is doing supernova research. This was PlaneWave's own setup where they test their telescopes. This is the iTelescope 24-inch. This is NASA and DLR's telescope, a 24-inch they use for the Sophia Airborne Observatory. And this 16-inch over here is owned and operated by a golf pro who's on the PGA Tour, has won a bunch of championships, makes millions of dollars, but his hobby is astrophotography. So we're in pretty good company inside that shed. Here's the telescope looking as the sky was getting a little bit dark. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's an RC Optical Systems 16-inch telescope with a very long focal length, mounted on a Paramount ME with 100 pounds of counterweight. The CCD is a big honking monster 4K square camera. And it's got an adaptive optics unit. It's got the 2-inch square monster filters on it. And a big shout out of thanks to Doug and Mercedes from Diffraction Limited / SBIG, and to Colin Haig for negotiating, getting us Wonderful deal on the camera. Also, Colin donated a Canon 6D that is Hugh-Tech modified with a 200mm lens that runs on top for wide field. Lots of software. To operate anything remote or anything that can be automated involves software for all the components. Tons of stuff in there, including automation. And just to give you an idea of the field of view, it's just a little bit more than squeezing in the full moon. So you get about a half a degree of field. A lot of people want a photograph of M31. It won't fit. M31 is just too big. And you can do wonderful things like this where you can actually see the frame, and we've got a guide star sitting there on the guide chip. And this is what a 15-minute, just a single 15-minute frame can look like. The DSLR mounted on top with the 200mm lens gives you a much bigger field of view, and the main telescope only sees this, whereas the 200mm lens gives you a 10 by 7 degree field of view. So you can do things like this, and here's what the close-up looks like. So you can actually run both simultaneously and get lots of data. And by the way, here's M31 taken with the wide field. This is just a single 3-minute frame. Like I said, the place is dark. The way it's been set up and organized, it's all run by teams. There's a team, the operations team looks after the entire telescope, looks after operating the telescope and the maintenance of the telescope. They're the only people who actually touch it and operate it. Then there are 3 user teams. There's astrophotography, science, and outreach. And what we've been doing is start the team small as pilot projects to be able to work through process, work through issues to make this stuff run smoothly. And each of the teams comes up with observing plans. Those get operated and executed on the telescope. And then the data that comes from one of those observing nights gets shared with all the members of the team. So I got to tell you one thing, it's really interesting, is if you give 50 people the same observational data for astrophotography, you will get 50 different images looking completely different. Just the way people process stuff. And then there's the science team and also the outreach team. So far we're trying this out and assigning different teams different nights during the week so people can plan what they're going to do. Of course, this isn't carved in stone, because if there's some interesting astronomical event, like there's the lunar eclipse that happened back in January, it was cloudy, but you can plan around it, or some big asteroid is coming close to the Earth and passing close, we can alter and juggle around some of the nights. A couple of things, the astrophotography group in particular, it's an interesting learning experience. It's not the same as just pulling all your gear into the car, driving out to a dark site, setting it up, and taking some images for the night. You have to learn to plan. It's not only the target planning that has to be how you frame the target, how you pick an appropriate guide star, what type of imaging plans, what type of filters, what type of exposures you're going to use. Most people think of one-night imaging. With these types of telescopes and this particular setup, you're doing multi-night targets. Multi-night imaging for a particular target. And it depends on what the night is. It can be perfectly clear with no moon for the entire night around new moon, or part of the night is no moon, part of the night is moon. So you have to plan, not only just weeks, but even months in advance. So you start thinking more in the professional side of doing this. The other thing we've put together within the team is an astrophotography resource list. This will come in really helpful. Some of the items are free, some of the items are for pay, but new imagers who join in, want to be part of this and work with the data, they'll be able to work within the learning curve and help them along with this, because this is all going to be new for an awful lot of people. The science team has been working away, again, a small group just to sort of work through the process. They've been able to do some asteroid astrometry, and the goal here was to pull the astrometry together to submit it to the Minor Planet Center to get an MPC observatory code for the telescope. So any future work or observations, data reduction from it, or even discoveries can be immediately sent in, and we have an official observatory code. The outreach We've actually been doing this kind of fun, some live telescope sky tours. We've been doing this with the youth outreach group with Jenna, and being able to do live tours where people have connected in over WebEx, share the screen, get to see what's going on, and we go around the sky and take snapshot images of some targets. We've also put together the opportunity to do multi-target snapshot images where Jenna was getting some requests for a bunch of targets. We put them in and let the telescope run automatically and get snapshots of those targets. Challenges. This is where we need your help. And one of the things is, first of all, I was going to say, wait till after my talk for any particular questions, but if you have ideas, feel free to come up and talk to me after the talk or talk to Randy as well about these. Communications. Communications, you think would be pretty simple. You set up email lists, so there's communications that go on, but at some point we've got to move to a forum-based system, because even within a group, you're going to have multiple different topics that are going on. Some people just want to focus on, say with the astrophotography team, focus on just CCD image processing versus DSLR processing versus picking out targets versus how to do something else. You don't want to be inundated with tons of emails during the day, and that's going to be really difficult for people to manage. So the forum concept is something we need to move towards. Data. We actually thought this was going to be an easy slam dunk, that we were going to get someone somewhere was going to give us free server space somewhere to house all this data. By the way, when you're shooting with the big telescope, you're easily getting at least a gig to a gig and a half of data a night. Same thing is similar if you're shooting with the DSLR. Lots of data per night, and that stuff adds up. But we had hoped that this would be something that was pretty simple. And the other side of it is just not storing the data, but when you have several hundred people that want to log in and get that data, how do you manage all that? So Randy and I have been talking about a couple of solutions, but we're also looking for other opportunities with that. So that's something else we've got to find a long-term solution for. The other issue is recruiting. We've got lots of interest. We have people that we were training and are training to be able to operate the telescope and train people within the teams how to make use of the software and do the planning. But again, some of the issues is it's run by amateurs. It's run by people who are volunteering their time. And one of the things that's really easy is during the winter, the sun sets early. You may have noticed that. So even the telescope being on the West Coast, yeah, it's pretty early for those of us on the East Coast to be able to work with the telescope. But as we hit summertime and we've got the solstice coming up, the telescope can't really be used to do any imaging till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night Pacific time. You can do the 3-hour time zone difference for yourself here, and on the East Coast, that's 12:31 in the morning. And to try and get people to try training people and get people engaged in this and get them up to speed on this stuff, you're talking about doing this from like 1 in the morning till 3 in the morning on a weeknight. Stuff like that's really difficult. So I'm going to be putting out another recruiting drive and hopefully get more people out on the West Coast, because that'll also make things a little bit easier. We're also looking for people that are able to do some JavaScript, because down the road for some of the future automation we want to do requires JavaScripting. So some programming is involved. But the other issue has been training. And besides the time zone differences, we've run into a bit of a problem with that last point that's on there. That deals with the weird weather. And one of the things I just wanted to show, the slide that I showed at the beginning, with 237 wonderful clear nights at least a year averaged out. Well, I've been familiar with that site for 12 years. And for the entire state of California and most of the United States and other parts of the world, this year has been absolutely crazy. This is what it's been this year. You can see where it's a lot less. And December was just disaster. I mean, there was not a single entire night. You get a couple hours. It's almost like being in Toronto for most of the year. You get a couple hours of observing and you're done. But we've been running into this problem. And I just want to point out for the month of June, where we're currently at right now, there was 6 nights. Last night was clear, so I can bump this up to 7. But the fact is, look at where it stands compared to what historically has been happening. And this is happening worldwide. So this is just not California or that site. Friends in California have been complaining about the weather the entire year. And as a matter of fact, Los Angeles, for the first time in decades, for the month of February, never hit 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And usually that's a normal thing. So bizarre weather has been affecting how fast we can move forward with the project. But what I do want to share with you is some of the early results that we've gotten from some of the data we've been able to collect and some of the stuff that the astrophotography team has been put together. What you're going to see here is the data came off the telescope, but the individuals with their names here did the processing, and I also noted which province they are from. So if you want, you can cheer for your province too. So the Pac-Man Nebula, I mean, I don't have to tell you what these shots are. But this is wide field. The other one was through the main telescope. This is through the 200 mm lens. This is Comet 46P, also through the 200. This shot actually of the tulip, this was just shot on Thursday night. And the arrow there, the white arrow that you see, is pointing to Cygnus X1. Chris, I thought you were going to leave those for me. Yeah, the arrow is pointing to Cygnus X1 there. And again, this is just part of the collecting of data right now. We've only got a couple of nights of imaging, but this one's going to add up a lot more data. Also a wide field, you got the double cluster and the heart and soul, the dumbbell. A Comet 46P and M45. M77, come on, everybody knows what these targets are, right? You can do an entire Messier marathon right here. Again, wide view of Orion. M101. Through the main scope. And somebody's favorite, the Sombrero M104. This is just what the total field looks like, but if you zoom in a little bit, you start to pick out some of the details that are in there in this type of shot. So lots of possibilities, lots of capabilities for it. And if the weather continues to get back to what is normal for North America, for that matter, then we'll be able to move at a much, much faster rate. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. If you do have suggestions or ideas, my email address is up there. Thank you.
We have time for a couple of quick questions before we break. And Paul said as he's going to be here. Les?
Just a very quick question. Historically and now, currently, referencing the weird weather, what about the forest fires in California?
Questions about the
affected by that?
Yeah, questions the effect of the site, forest fires, smoke, that kind of thing.
Regarding the forest fires and smoke, there's only been a couple of times over the past 12 years where they've basically kept the facility closed. They do have a new sky monitor that actually can measure the particulate in the air. So it's only a couple times that the roof has been closed when the sky is clear, and you don't want it open because you can actually see the sky has got that brown. But any of the fire has been so far away, but usually it's still the high altitude stuff as it flies by. But nothing close, fortunately. Yeah.
Any planetary imaging, like unraveling of the red spot?
Unfortunately, anything about planetary imaging with that telescope. The telescope is not configured for doing planetary. They actually do have a C14 on site that somebody is using for that, but it's not for us. Yeah, Tanya?
A couple quick questions. So one, you mentioned at sometimes potentially is there any opportunities as we look forward to lower that cost to open up access to all members?
Yeah, good question. What was the first question?
How many people are participating?
Oh, how many people? We are still in the throes of preparing to open it up to members. We did, if you go back and look through some national newsletters, it points to a Google site where we have been dumping data as we get it, so you can access that data now. As Paul said, the trick is setting up some sort of configuration so that people can join, you know, the hundreds of people can join, log in and access the data. We don't have that yet. When we purchased it last year, we had a campaign to raise money to pay for it, and we raised a considerable amount of money towards the cost, which is $30,000. We raised $30,000. There is a rental fee at the site, so we need to continue to raise money to support that. And so there's going to be a user fee, to use the telescope, whether you want to be on the astrophotography team or the science team. Okay, it's interesting because I've asked people who actually buy time on telescopes, and people say, well, to buy time on a telescope your size, your site, it's $100 to $120 a month. And I think that price point would price a lot of people out. So I think what we want to do is make it such that, well, I think I'm going to survey the membership and say, well, who would be interested in using this telescope, and what would you be prepared to pay? So if I get 500 members want to join, and they're saying, well, yeah, I'd pay 30, 40, 50, $80 a year or something like that, I think we can work with that. I don't think it should be zero because it costs to run. But also, let's face it, at least where we live here in the GTA, from Halloween to Easter, what do? But you log on and you download all this great stuff that's going on in California. That is the whole idea. And whether you want to grab all this data and do your own astrophotography, or get involved with science and actually do some real science. I mean, I can see us actually beginning to write up papers from this telescope. I don't remember members actually getting together and doing that. So that's really the purpose. But the roadblocks are some of the technical things. The training is going well. The telescope is working. It's the interface that we will have to make it available. I really wanted it to be ready now. But until we have the hours and the nights to get everything together, it's a challenge. But we do want some input from people, maybe who have a technical background, who know how we might be able to solve the, how do we allow 500 people to log into a site to download data? Because the thing is, we want to archive this data. Because 30 years from now, someone may want to go back and look at something that was shot with the telescope and actually do some research with it. Okay? All right, let's have a break till 3:30.